I'm Michael, and welcome to Beyond Screenplays, What We're Watching, our podcast where we watch a television series week by week. Today we're talking about The Last of Us, created by Craig Mazin and Neil Druckmann, specifically Season 2, Episode 6, titled The Price, available on HBO Max. I'm joined by the Beyond Screenplay team, Trisha Arand.
Hello, everyone.
Brian Bittner.
Hello, hello.
And Alex Calleros.
Hi.
All right, so we got some Joel in this episode. I'm really excited to talk about the return of Joel. This unlocks some structure conversations because we got a lot of Joel flashback, and so I think we can dive deep into the why this was done this way and what was gained and what was lost perhaps in doing it. I want to talk about how you measure relationships in a story and the importance of sacrifice toward that, and there's a lot of sacrifice in The Last of Us. And we got to see Eugene. We got that payoff that was set up early and how it was used to kind of bring out this emotional confrontation I thought was really good.
Joey Pants.
Joey Pants.
Yeah.
Nobody here wants to say his real name. Joey Pants is his official name.
Joey Pants.
When Trisha said, "Oh, I just saw who's playing Eugene," and then I looked, accidentally saw it when I was like scrolling through something else. I was like, "Oh, that'll be hilarious."
Nope.
I'll laugh a minute. That was this movie or this episode for sure. So I want to get into all of that really quick. Before we do, I want to do just some quick podcast business. So our theme for our upcoming season is going to be Big Swing Summer. So we're going to be talking about movies that are extremely ambitious, overly ambitious probably, and in some ways are like the best movies ever, but also flawed at the same time. We've got some ideas for movies, but we want to hear from you guys. What are some movies you think fall into the big swing category that you would like us to talk about and cover? Leave those in the comments. And then also, we're getting ready to talk about Mission Impossible, The Final Reckoning. We did a whole series a couple years ago leading up to Dead Reckoning Part 1, where we covered the whole Mission Impossible series except for 2. So that's available in our catalog and over on the Beyond Screenplay Patreon. And so our new episode talking about The Final Reckoning will be available for patrons over on the Beyond Screenplay Patreon very soon.
Which, if that's not a big swing, someone did something wrong.
It all connects here.
Yeah.
So fun stuff. Let us know. Big swing movies. Also, just in general, if you're new to the podcast, movies, TV shows you'd like us to cover in the future, let us know in the comments. But now, The Last of Us. So I loved this episode. I thought this was really, really great the whole time. I was like, this is what I come to The Last of Us for. I thought it was structured really, really well. We get that really interesting cold open with young Joel and his dad talking about fatherhood, setting up, the last line. There's a nice book in there, right? I hope you do a little bit better than me. He uses that again when he's talking to Ellie. And I feel like it felt like a catharsis to me of so much of what I needed to understand and feel with Ellie and Joel and what's been going on underneath was there. I think the changes that they made in order to show the dominoes falling of how we see Joel tell Ellie what he did, what really happened, I thought were new and really compelling and putting characters into intense situations where they have to make revealing choices, and then the motivations coming out of that make crystal clear sense, and it's excruciating to watch, but so good. I feel like Bella Ramsey, Pedro Pascal were amazing in this episode. The performances were just beautiful. Anyway, so I loved the scene or this episode, and in some ways that makes me frustrated because I think things were sacrificed in order to achieve this episode, and I'm wondering if the net gain was worth that. But that's what I want to talk about. Brian, I want to hear your thoughts. How are you feeling after this episode?
I mean, very positive overall. I think just to go off what you just said, some things were sacrificed for the season. My biggest, not even complaint or gripe, but my biggest, I guess, personal setback for this episode is feeling the writery kind of guys in a room with index cards, looking at all the flashbacks from the game and looking at this and being like, let's put this here and let's put this here. Let's add this so then we can take that line and then repeat it over here. And that's also me knowing the game really well and having spent the last 5 episodes with you guys talking about, oh, this thing was maybe not where we thought it would be. And that's interesting. Why was that? You know, something like Ellie playing the first lines of Future Days last episode, right? And it's like, in a way that feels like that could be like, let's recontextualize it. So it's a setup, you know, it's almost a payoff before the setup. Or it's, we have to put this somewhere in the season and she's not going to play guitar after episode 6. So I guess we'll just put it here and it'll just make sense kind of holistically once you've seen the whole thing, which is also true. It will. So that was the only thing where I was just like, I'm seeing a lot of the sort of how like you just said, Michael, a lot of the season was kind of maybe picked apart to make this episode work. That being said, this episode works. You know, they took, I think 4 flashbacks from the game, put them together into one episode, added the cold open with young Joel, added the Eugene thing, and made it all make sense together. We can get into that, but it felt like it just did a really good job of giving us kind of everything we've been wanting, you know, more Joel, more context, some answers to some of the questions, even what Gail says, you know, how you did it and you know, with Eugene and all that stuff. And as you said, the performances were just like anything I had that felt like a little, like I was seeing the scaffolding, you know, was fixed by just these performances and just these characters making me really believe every second of what they were doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Alex, what about you? How are you feeling?
Yeah. I it's hard for me to talk about this without getting into editor mode. And I know that's a conversation you want to have, but I think watching this season and especially seeing it through Trisha's eyes, you know, she's not played the game. She doesn't have the context of these flashbacks already. I was both enjoying the episode, and as it went on, I was liking it more and more and more. I thought the scenes got more and more, the sequences were really well done. You know, the sequence with Joey Pants was so powerful. It's a new thing for the game. I'm honestly afraid to say his last name. Not Pants.
Pantoliano.
Yeah, see, I don't know. I can't trust that I'm gonna say it right. So Joey Pants. Like the scenes just got better and better up until that final porch scene, which was also really amazing. And so the whole time that was happening, I was just thinking, what if this was episode 3? What if episode 3 began with the washing of Joel's body, the 2 brothers, you know, dead body of Joel and his brother there, that could go into the Texas flashback. Then we have Ellie, is like unconscious or whatever, and we can almost use the framing device of her being out or unconscious or in the hospital as going back in time, seeing her memories from the last few years, ending with her, you know, waking up in that horrific state after we see all these flashbacks, maybe ending with a flash to Joel's death again. And so we get all this context, how they were just about to mend their relationship, and then it's all cut short with this horrific, brutal thing that she doesn't like understand, and then wakes up screaming. And that sets the stage for the rest of the season, which is, here's what Ellie has lost. Here's how it was cut short at just the worst possible moment. And this is, now we're in her headspace, and now we can understand moving forward what's going on. And so I don't understand, honestly, even in the game to some degree, I don't fully understand the purpose of withholding these things, you know, until like the very end. Because the sequence on the porch is like almost the very last thing you see in the game, right? I mean, so it's like the game withholds information almost all the way until the very end. And even as a game player, I'm not sure about that choice. I think I'd rather just be with the characters. And once again, I think I can appreciate The Last of Us Part 2, the game, is doing some experimental stuff, and it is playing with me as player with the controller, controlling characters who I don't even necessarily agree with or understand, but I'm still pushing forward and doing this anyway, and that's a weird feeling. So there's a lot of experimental cool stuff, once again, in that game experience. if you're doing a week by week TV show where we have to wait a week between each episode, there's only so long I'm willing to wait for these answers. And I just really think this episode would have been so good following Joel's death and setting the stage for the rest of the season. And I'm just really frustrated because I think it would have recontextualized a lot of things in a good way. And I don't know how saving it or making it like a reveal. Like I felt like when we cut to Ellie at the end of this episode back in Seattle, it wasn't like, ooh, perfect. It was just more of like, okay, like we did it now instead of earlier. And now we're back to the stream we were in. But like cutting away from her beating the girl to death in the red hallway and then cutting back to Seattle here, I didn't understand why this was the moment for all this. And so basically I agree. It was all very good. I wish it had come earlier, and I wonder how that would have changed how everything else has felt since.
Yeah, my thought initially was that we needed to miss Joel for a few episodes to really feel his absence. So having a flashback with him right after his death wouldn't achieve that. That said, it would achieve everything else you just said. So it feels like it would have been worth it in putting us in Ellie's headspace. And like also, I think I heard Craig Mason say, like, now that you've seen this episode, now you have the context for Ellie in that red hallway. I'm like, do we? Like, I don't know that I feel more like, oh, now that we're there. So yeah, it's interesting.
Honestly, yeah, I also don't feel like it fixes all the problems either if you put it earlier. Right. But I do think I would miss Joel more having seen this episode. I would be like when Ellie's like putting coffee on his grave. If I had just seen this episode, I would be more with her than I was.
Yeah, Trisha. Talk to us. How are you feeling?
Sorry, I went up for a while there.
Well, I'm with you. My pitch for after I watched this episode was just swap the last episode and this one. Like literally just make this episode 5. So it accomplishes the thing you're talking about, Brian, where we miss Joel. And I really did. Like when the episode started and Pedro Pascal walked in, I was like, oh, thank God. Like I missed him so much. And then so much of the episode is this lovely, difficult relationship, but like a meaningful relationship that I'm invested in. And I think making me miss that did accomplish something. But I feel like I absolutely needed to have all of this. I needed all of this before we got to the last episode. So like they go to the theater, Ellie and Dina confess their love for each other. They find out Dina is pregnant, which also I'm like, hey, Ellie, if you ever get into this position, I hope you do a little bit better than me. Ellie finds out she's gonna be a dad. Okay, which she's not. Everyone's ignoring the fact that Jesse is also actually the dad. But that's fine. But in Ellie's mind, right, she's gonna be caring for a little one, but responsible in a parenting role. So if that's the case, then juxtapose that with the thing that informs this thematically. Right before, like she finds that out. Then we have this episode. Then we see why she goes and does what she does when she gets into the hospital. And I don't understand what is really gained by this like weird gotcha that the show is trying to do to me. I'm like, but what's the gotcha here? Like, if I knew what the song meant, if I understood that in the theater going into that, it weights all of that more like heavily, and it doesn't. I still am not quite sure that the turn is earned for other thematic reasons, which we can get to, where she makes that really dark turn to the dark place and the violence. However, it goes a damn closer way. We're a lot closer if we have this episode before we have the last episode. And so I really am, I'm perplexed in my experience of watching this, because I'm with you. Like, Michael, when I was watching this episode, I was just so emotionally involved in it. I don't think it's like bump free, but I do think it speaks to the heart of what is compelling about the show. And so I just don't understand why we don't have the context for the dramatic choices to understand what they mean in terms of the character arc and themes before we have the choices. Like, so I don't know. It almost is more frustrating for how good it is.
Yeah.
'Cause I feel like there's a form that has been used in kind of, think about like a twisty Christopher Nolan movie where it's fun to rewatch it a second time once you have all the pieces. But I don't know, like a 7-week long drama is not the form where I would think like hide all the information so I don't understand what the characters are doing until later. I think I just want to feel the right thing in the moment that week, and there can still be mysteries, there can be questions, and I think obviously we want questions and mysteries as audience members, but when it comes to just character motivations and character emotions and drama, where that's all that's happening on screen, if it's just a blank slate, I don't understand anything about what is going on inside of them. Those scenes are just not compelling in the moment.
And going back to TV structure, there's a really big difference between hiding information within an episode that's revealed at the end of the episode,
right,
versus something that's revealed at the end of the season. That's a different thing. If you want to do like a reverse setup payoff kind of thing where like, okay, I don't know what the coffee means when she puts it on Joel's grave. If you told me that at the end of the episode, that might mean something different. Or like if you tell me what the line means at the end of the episode, or you reveal something in the same thematic like chunk of dramatic storytelling, that's really different than making me wait weeks and weeks to figure out what it is. And it's one of those things speaks to classical TV structure and episodic structure, as we've discussed before. We really got into this a lot on our season 1 conversation about what is so good about that season is that it understands itself as a weekly television show. And the episodes are structured in sort of a classical weekly television show way. And this season does not seem to understand itself as a weekly show in the same way that the last season did. And that's really frustrating.
Remember Lost?
I really do. I sure do, right, Michael?
I think there's something really interesting in the source material here too, because I think it's fair to say that the video game is interested in making you rethink how you feel about things and people and kind of recontextualizing things for you. Even like events from like, the first season where we have more perspective on that even in this season. But I think it's interesting as an experiment. But for all the reasons we're saying, I don't know that it works in a TV show where you need to understand the why and be bought in. We talk about Breaking Bad as the kind of perfect example of something where you may not agree with what the character is doing, but you always understand the why behind it. And so that leaves room for empathy if you're willing, but at least an understanding of what it means that this person is making these choices. And I think you need that in television and in cinematic narrative storytelling, where we want to be with the people, even if we don't agree with them. I think we need to be like identify with them and understand. And so it's an interesting experiment, and I feel like in 4 years or whatever it is when the show is finally like finished, people might look back and have lots of different feelings and thoughts about all of this. Is that worth it is an interesting question that I struggle with personally.
Right. Well, I'll echo something I said a couple episodes ago, which is two things the game does. Is one, it makes you feel like Joel's death is just completely out of nowhere, and it's just horrifying and awful, and then Ellie has to go get revenge. And people pointed out in our episode last week, in the game, it's a video game. So you're running around as Ellie killing like dozens of dudes. So then Nora in the Red Hallway is like worse than those things, but it feels like an escalation. Whereas Trisha, you pointed out in the show, we've seen Ellie kill like 4 people or something like that, right? So this feels like, oh, wow, way out of left field, right? The other thing the game does is using that like bad person killed good person, so other good person has to go avenge. Then it starts kind of peeling apart Ellie a little bit and being like, maybe her motivations weren't as noble or pure as we thought. And I think her finding out the truth, us finding out that she already knew the truth about what Joel did late in the game gives us even more doubt about our sort of support of Ellie's revenge story. And throughout the course of that, we're also learning a little bit about Abby's backstory too. So it's sort of doing this thing where it's kind of making us question how we feel about things. Here, because things were done in a different way, as we're talking about, the motivations don't feel as clear. So as I think you were saying, Alex, hiding some of these things and revealing them later doesn't do the same thing. And you could even argue in the game it's messy, but here it feels like it's like, ooh, she knew all along. It's like, okay, but so what? What does that make me feel, right? That doesn't give me that like aha moment that I think you were hoping it would give me.
Yeah.
I want to say one other thing, but Michael, did you want to?
Mm-hmm. No, keep going.
Okay. What I do want to praise is the opposite of what we're talking about, which is this episode took things that were disparate in the game and put them into a single piece of art, essentially. So for context, in the game, there are multiple flashbacks that happen throughout the game. So Joel playing Future Days for Ellie is one. The whole dinosaur natural history museum space thing is another, which is like iconic and beautiful, and they basically just copied it straight out of the game because it's perfect. Ellie actually goes to Salt Lake City, which is weirdly where I am right now, and to find out the truth and find some evidence about what Joel did. Joel shows up, and then she confronts him about it. She finds out. Then later we have the porch scene where she says, "I don't know if I can forgive you, but I'd like to try." So Craig Mazin, Neil Druckmann, Hallie Gross took all of that and constructed this episode out of all of that, where we're kind of coming back in this series of birthdays. And then we get the cold open with Joel, where then we're going to take a line from there and put it at the end. And then we're going to insert Eugene here to have a more dramatic way for Ellie to realize, you promised, you broke your promise. Remember that last time you said, "I swear," and she says, "You swore, not you promised." And even though he says, "I promise." So I do want to praise that everything we're talking about being like, hey, an episode should know what an episode is. That is also what this episode was doing. It was taking disparate things in the game and putting it together in something that felt really cohesive and of a piece. And I think that's really cool.
Yes.
Yeah, 100%. I feel like this episode was masterful. Like seeing all those pieces come together, like you're saying, having them be thematically connected and coherent and take you on an emotional ride. Let the focus be about parenting and the sacrifices and this idea of trying to do a little bit better. It's there throughout, and it's really, really powerful and really clever, I think, to find that through line through all of these flashbacks and put it together. And then it is interesting, the introduction of Eugene, which feels thematically separate from the idea of, the sort of the parent-child relationship. But that's not really a knock. Like one tiny thing not being perfectly in thematic unison is there. And it is still about a really intense emotional relationship and family and all this stuff. And so I think it was really cool to see this information get pulled out in this dramatic way and see the dominoes fall and put Joel into another situation where he has to lie in the exact same way, and then see Ellie make the choice that she makes and call him out and like explode the whole thing. Like characters taking action, revealing character, reversal. Like it's just really, really good. And I think earns all the emotional buildup that you need for that porch scene. So yeah, just from a construction level, as you were saying, Brent, I think this is amazing.
Yeah. Yes to all of that. It's very well done. I was desperate to know like what the source material was as I was watching it, because I was getting the really strong feeling that some of it was lifted straight out of the game. And then I also knew that the Eugene plotline couldn't be, because I know that character is new, and Gale too. So I was so curious to see like how it was adapted. And I think you took all of what you had and made the smartest adaptation choices possible. The birthday construction is brilliant, right? Because it creates this like specificity and sort of like formalism to what they're doing, and it kind of does that outside pressure thing where it like the construction of Joel feels like he has to do something for Ellie on her birthday, and there's this ritual almost that they have, is its own like pressure cooker of a situation where they're gonna be, you know, he's got a thing going on and it's gonna reveal some stuff. And I thought all of it was just, very smart writing. And I will say I appreciated a lot the cold open and how it actually draws the theme of violence into the dialogue, because as you guys just said, one of the biggest issues that I've had with this show is that it's about violence. And if you don't have the experience of playing a violent video game, then you kind of have to make it about violence a little bit in the text. And so far, it kind of hasn't been much in the text, other than like the few violent actions that are taken, but not very much about like, what does it mean? Other than
the
in
meaning
the
of
scene,
violence.
The meaning,
because I feel like there's
violence,
gore
right?
and there's like, you know, that kind of
Right.
violence, but like the meaning of violence, I
right,
think
in
is,
terms of like the soul, right, and the character psychology. And you know, I appreciated that the cold open finally got to that. And I don't think I've ever seen a scene like that before, where you see an abusive parent admitting to it to the children, and also like kind of linking it to this like cycle of violence that he's been a part of, that he doesn't necessarily feel able to totally break out of that pattern. I thought all of that was great. And I was like, finally, some violence in the text. What does it mean? Because I was thinking a lot about the scene at the baseball game that we've talked about now a number of times, with Gale and Tommy, where Gale addresses the violence directly in the dialogue, and Tommy does too. And kind of, for me, that scene is so like maybe thematically the key to this entire season, or it announces itself to me that way when I watch it. I went back and watched it again after this episode. All that being said, when Ellie finally finds out about Joel murdered everybody in Salt Lake, her response is not actually to all of that violence. Like, her anger is mostly about herself and like her own purpose, right? This sense of like, dying there would have given my life meaning, and you took that away. Not, you murdered dozens of people in cold blood. That's
Or we
not
could have
what
saved the world.
she's mad
Right.
about. Right, yeah. She's not about all the murder and death and violence, actually. That's not why she's upset. She's upset about her purpose being taken away. And that felt like a new theme to me a little bit. Like, I don't know if I've really seen Ellie ever wrestling with this idea of like life having a purpose, her life in particular having a purpose. She doesn't live that way. Never heard her talk about it to Dina or anyone else. So that kind of felt like it missed an opportunity to kind of bring the aspect, the thematic conversation about cycles of violence. It's there when Joel says, I hope you do a little bit better than me. But it's not in Ellie's response. It's not there in what has Ellie been stewing about all of this time? Is it about the fact that Joel is inherently violent and has killed lots of people? It seems like no. It seems like actually that isn't what she's mad about. And that was really startling to me.
It was interesting because there is a close-up of a piece of paper in her room with a bunch of moth drawings around it where it's something about purpose, you know, like, and so I think there's something interesting there. Once again, I wish it was, like you're saying, Trisha, more in the text, or more context has been given for who Ellie is moving forward in this story after Joel's death. But it does feel to me that there's something potentially interesting there. Why does she turn towards the dark side? What is this descent that I think, you know, the game shows very clearly, and the show kind of did a left turn into, which is if she realizes that she could have served this purpose, this really important purpose for the whole world, and Joel essentially kind of like on her behalf decided, no, you're going to serve a different purpose. You're going to be my daughter. Like, I will die. I will not be able to survive, me, Joel, if you die. I can't do that again. I lost a daughter once. I can't go through it again. So I'm going to save you to save me. And then if Joel is then killed in this seemingly senseless, horrible way, it's like my initial purpose was taken away. And then my like second purpose that maybe almost made the horrific thing that Joel did. Like, at least we have each other. We have this beautiful father-daughter relationship. I've provided this for you, Joel, this thing that you need. And then that's gone too. Then it's like 2 times purpose has been robbed through violence. And what else is left but just more violence? And so there's pieces here that maybe I could assemble in such a way to get me more on board with this revenge story. If they were more in the text and more, I don't know, I was walked on this journey versus, once again, it feels like Ellie, I haven't been with her the last couple episodes, and I was so with her in this episode. I was so with her the whole time. The look on her face as they're riding away after Eugene has been killed was like so amazing. Because I'm like, I know all the layers of emotions and things she's thinking about. Oh my God, he's been lying to me. And so I've been with her so much in this episode, and I have not been with her on the road to Seattle and in Seattle. And there's something here with purpose, and like, it's not just grief. It's also, I was alive and immune for a reason, taken away. I was not made into a cure for a reason for Joel, taken away. That seems like a cool story to me, of like, nothing is left.
Yeah. I wish it were in the text the way that you're describing.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I agree. It feels like that idea of meaning kind of emerged in this episode out of nowhere. It also reminded me that in the game, you like your journal of like what you've been doing is literally Ellie's journal, and so you do get kind of little windows and insights into how she's thinking about things. But to kind of bring it back to some of the more writery, like lessony things, I think, Trisha, you talk a lot about how when we're in private with characters, we need to see them being their real selves. I think we got some really good examples of that in this episode, where we see Ellie rehearsing what she's going to say to Joel, like, and we get to see how she's struggling with it, how she feels about it. Like, this is clearly something she really wants to know because she's practicing. Like, using that scenario to give us a window into the headspace of the character is really effective, and is exactly the kind of thing, as we've called out, that they haven't done on the kind of trip through Seattle. So, yeah, I think that was interesting to see these techniques that are utilized so well in this episode. It's almost conspicuous that they've been missing in other parts. And then, yeah, I was just thinking again about like what this idea of sacrifice in relationships, and how in a story, in a movie where it's all about action and doing things, like it has to be, emotions and mental states have to be externalized. I think one of the best ways to externalize like the power of a relationship, how much one character cares about another, is what they're willing to sacrifice for them, and getting to see them choose the other person over their own personal interests. Just watched the season 2 finale of Hacks. That had a great example of that too. Just like the character growth and all that can be shown by seeing a character choose something that's worse for them but better for somebody else. And it just made me think about how Joel sacrificed the world for Ellie. And I think that was really powerful in that porch scene, and that he says, you know, I would do it again. Like, it's so audacious, but it's so real, and the love is just so palpable that it earns, for me, Ellie saying, I don't think I can forgive you, but I'd like to try. Like, I don't know that I would have expected that reaction from her, but the enormity of the love that comes out of this sacrifice, I think, is really powerful and like unique to The Last of Us. And I think that's what still makes the show and the story so special. It's like when that's there, there's just so much present.
Yeah, there was a weird time thing for me, and this is kind of when I say like I see the scaffolding a little bit, again, just knowing the source material so well, where she finds out when she goes back to Salt Lake City about what Joel did, and then later we have the porch scene where she says, I don't know if I can forgive you, but I'd like to try. Here she basically confirms it to herself in the Eugene sequence, but then it's only in that porch scene where she finds out for real, and then seconds later says, I don't know if I can forgive you from like, but I'd like to try. And I was like, ooh, was that earned? Like with no time in between to be like, I just found out all the horrifying truths, and my next line is, I don't know if I can forgive you, but I'd like to try. But again, as you just said, Michael, like the construction of it, the performances and everything, it's like about as good as you can do to sort of be like, how are we going to get from this moment to this moment in seconds and actually sell it? And again, I don't know how I'd feel. Trisha, I don't know if that felt for you like earned essentially. But for me, it's just like knowing that there wasn't the sort of time gap that there was in the game just made it feel like, oh man, that's a big turn to go from you just did all that stuff to I don't know if I can forgive you, but I'd like to try.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a parent. So anytime anything about like parents being willing to do literally anything for their children, I'm just like, yeah, I mean, yeah, like it's so real. And I was actually reminded in that scene of the scene with Eugene, actually, in the exchange with Eugene at the side of the lake. When he says, like, if you have any last words, I'll pass them along. And Eugene says, that's not what I need. I need her last words for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That hurt. That was a good line.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, the performances, just all the performances.
Joey Pants.
Joey Pants, so good.
And even just the choice to show the birds flying away without the gunshot.
The
it's like, how many times have we seen that? We don't
Beautiful.
need the sound. Yeah.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah.
But thinking about that, you know, you were talking, Michael, about family relationships and this almost like interdependent, reciprocal love and need, like so much so that it, you know, what you're willing to sacrifice for it becomes almost limitless. And so I was thinking about that exchange where, yeah, he was saying, I need her last words for me. And then it's like, well, if you love someone, you can always see their face, right? And then he says, I can see her. I just, when Joel is describing how much he loves Ellie, I think it wasn't impossible to me that you could be so compelled and so enwrapped in that kind of love that you wouldn't want to try to repair that relationship and stay in that relationship. Mm-hmm. I thought the performance was lovely. It is a bit of a quick turn, but I think it worked for me, especially because she did kind of already know it.
Right, exactly.
I think if it was like,
months, kind of,
you know, the shock in the moment of like, how dare you? I fully believed your lie for so long.
Right.
It's like she definitely didn't. So I think it worked okay. But also,
that's what earned it for me was the fact that it was essentially confirmed for her 9 months prior. Sorry.
Yeah. And she even talks about, I think, that she sort of was like, I think I knew anyway, right? And I feel like Bella Ramsey talked about, even in the end of season 1, her mental state for Ellie and that final moment when Joel lies to Ellie is like, I think Ellie probably knows, which I think is different than what the Ashley Johnson Ellie was thinking. And I know that was a conversation, but I feel like that was an interesting kind of payoff of, it seems like Ellie has known this whole time, this like the weight of this lie, and just needs him to admit it. And that's almost why it's extra painful when she sees him lie again and like confirms this kind of the fear that she has.
Mm-hmm.
I really love when TV or film can access these things that are really real and present in most of our lives, like in our families or in a friend group, or like there's always those unspoken things, or there's something where like nobody talks about this thing, and these things like take up space in the room, you know, these lies or these unspoken truths. And I just love when media can get at that thing, which is a thing we've all experienced at some point, where it's just there's a truth and we're all not talking about it, or we can't go there, but like we can all feel it. And I think just the heaviness of that feeling was portrayed so well in this episode.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah. I like this episode. I feel like it, it's that thing, as we've talked about, where it made me happy but also sad. It's so like conflicting of like, oh, I wish the rest of the season was this good, but also this was really good. Thinking about sacrifices and what you do for the other person also had me thinking about Ellie and Dina, and how we kind of, the lack of conflict that we've talked about also kind of comes with a lack of sacrifice. Like they're almost so on the same page that it doesn't feel like they're sacrificing a whole lot for one another, or at least that you could do more with that. And I think that could deepen that relationship. And yeah, now that we're going into the finale, I really don't know what to expect.
It's just like, we're doing the finale now? Like, what?
Well, and I wonder too, like, I would love for the next episode to try its best to kind of thematically pull it together.
Right.
Like, it was wild to me that Joel said, like, if you ever get there, I hope you do a little bit better than me, and then made no effort to remind us that Dina is pregnant, right, and that there's going to be a child introduced into Ellie's life, theoretically. I was like, make the thematic connection plain here. And I wonder if they will. Like, I wonder too about like editing. There are ways to do this with editing, right? Like, instead of cutting straight away to Ellie walking up to the theater in the rain, you could have cut back to Ellie walking into the theater in the rain, and she falls into Dina's arms. You could earlier, if you really needed to have the scene with Dina and Ellie, like Ellie finding out that Dina's pregnant, if you needed to have that come before this episode, you could have had a little bit more like thinking about, like, dialogue about what it will be like to be a parent. Like, oh, like, shoot, we're going to be parents. What's that going to be like? Who are we going to be when we become parents? Just some kind of thing to connect it to this Ellie in this episode. Because theoretically, this is the Ellie that was in that scene. Mm-hmm. It's like, there's so much that's being, that's dangling thematically that I would love to see neatened up and brought together. And so, yeah, like, Ellie's purpose, is that going to come back? We're going to find out more about that. Will we see the moths again? Will we, I don't know. Are we going to talk about violence anymore? We going to talk about it? I hope so. Let's find out.
Yeah. The moth thing, also the other thing is relationships, sacrifices, and seeing people put work into a thing. And we get to see Joel put a bunch of work into like perfecting the guitar that he gives to Ellie. That's another way to show, to externalize a relationship and how much someone cares.
I also love the tiny but very rich symbol of the bone, right? Where he puts a piece of death onto it, like, essentially, right? Like, into her guitar. And it's called out a few times in the text where he asks Seth for the bone. We see him working on the bone. And then when he gives it to Ellie, he tells her it has a real bone, you know, like, piece in it or whatever. It's like, bones are a symbol of death. Joel put death in his love for you, Ellie. Here it is. It's really nice. It's so literary.
Very literary.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll see. Will Jeffrey Wright come back? Was he just there for that one scene?
Please.
Like, I don't know. Let's find out.
Need
Like, yeah. But the last two episodes, right? This episode and the next one are directed by Neil Druckmann, if I'm not mistaken. And I think watching this episode did confirm to me that there was some macro plan in place, and maybe it's not hitting exactly the way it hoped, and maybe it is for other people, but that makes me extra curious going into this finale.
next episode is not directed by Neil Druckmann, but it is co-written by Neil Druckmann, Hallie Gross, and Craig Mazin, the sort of
Nice.
Great.
co-writers of the game and the writer of the show. Yeah.
Nice.
The Holy Trinity, if you will.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Speaking of Trinity, I heard they said on the podcast that Ellie had a Matrix poster in her room that had Joey Pants on it, and they were just like, well, we can't leave that there, so they had to cut it out with VFX. Yeah.
Oh, that's so funny. What version of the Matrix poster is he on?
Yeah.
He's the fourth person on the like the
original,
the normal
poster.
Oh,
Faces
wow.
poster. Yeah.
Oh, that's so cool.
That is really cool. All right. Well, yeah, we'll be back next week for the finale of season 2. Very curious to see what it is. I'm excited. As I said at the beginning, our theme for the next season is going to be Big Swing Summer. Let us know what big swing movies you want us to talk about in the comments. If you want to hear our conversation about Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning, that'll be available to patrons before the end of the month over on the Beyond the Screenplay Patreon. It's also where our retrospective of the first season lives, and where we will be posting our kind of recap reflection of season 2 after the finale. Once we've kind of gotten everything, we're going to do a dedicated episode about, now that we have the whole picture of season 2, what do we make of that? That'll be on the Beyond the Screenplay Patreon. We want to say a big thank you, as always, to the patrons that make this show possible. Thank you to our producer, Vince Major. Thank you to our editor, Mike Worth, and the whole Nebula Studios team. I'm Michael Tucker, and I've been joined today by Trisha Rand, Brian Bittner, and Alex Calleros. And we will see you next week for the season finale of season 2 of The Last of Us.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.